The rain hammered down on the colony's metallic rooftops, a rhythmic clatter that mirrored Sam Walker's rising frustration. He squinted at the official-looking letter in his hand, its embossed seal glinting in the dim light of his apartment. "Congratulations," it read. "You've been selected for the Interspecies Cultural Exchange Program." His name, neatly scrawled at the bottom, confirmed his supposed agreement to the arrangement. The problem? He hadn't signed anything. Sam tossed the letter onto the cluttered table, muttering curses under his breath. The colony was supposed to be a quiet retreat, a place to work as an engineer, tinker with old machinery, and avoid unnecessary entanglements. This wasn't just an entanglement. It was a bureaucratic nightmare. Before he could spiral further into annoyance, a sharp knock echoed through the room. He opened the door to find a tall figure cloaked in a shimmering robe of indigo and gold. The orrery female stepped forward, her light purple skin almost glowing under the hallway's flickering light. Her large, almond-shaped eyes, framed by flowing silver hair, locked onto his with unsettling intensity. She was stunning in a way that made him uncomfortable, her elegance only amplifying the awkwardness of the moment. "Samuel Walker?" she asked, her voice a soft melody that seemed to carry a strange resonance. "That's me," Sam replied, gripping the doorframe. "And you are?" "I am Kalira," she said, stepping inside uninvited. "Assigned to you as part of the program. I trust you've been informed." "Oh, I've been informed, all right," Sam shot back, closing the door behind her. "But there's been a mistake. I didn't sign up for this." Kalira tilted her head, a subtle smirk playing on her lips. "Your signature is on the contract. Whether you intended to participate is irrelevant. The bond has been initiated." "The bond?" Sam echoed, his stomach sinking. Kalira raised her hand, and for the first time Sam noticed the intricate markings on her wrist glowing faintly. "A psychic tether, ensuring compliance. Separation will result in discomfort, possibly even pain for both parties." Sam blinked. "You're kidding." "I assure you," Kalira replied, her tone turning cool, "I do not jest about matters of protocol." He sank into the nearest chair, running a hand through his hair. "This can't be happening. I've got work to do. I can't just babysit some alien ambassador or whatever this is supposed to be." "I am not a child," Kalira said, her tone sharp. "Nor am I here to disrupt your work. My role is to assist you, ensure cultural integration, and fulfill other needs as required." Sam shot her a skeptical look. "Define other needs." Kalira's smirk returned, this time with a hint of mischief. "That is dependent on you, but I assure you I am highly adaptable." Sam groaned, standing and pacing the room. "Look, there's got to be a way to undo this. A loophole. Someone I can talk to." Kalira's expression softened, though her gaze remained unwavering. "The bond is not easily dissolved. It was designed to foster cooperation and understanding, not to be discarded on a whim." "Great," Sam muttered, glaring at the letter still lying on the table. "Just great." Kalira followed his gaze. "You seem resistant, yet I sense an undercurrent of curiosity. Perhaps this arrangement is not as unwelcome as you claim." Sam stopped pacing and met her eyes. "You're reading my mind now." "Not your thoughts," she corrected. "Your emotions. It is an innate ability of my kind. I apologize if it feels invasive." "Invasive doesn't even begin to cover it," Sam said, crossing his arms. "Let's get one thing straight. I didn't ask for this, and I don't want it. So keep your abilities to yourself." Kalira's smile faded. "Understood, but the bond remains whether you desire it or not." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sam knew he was being unfair. Kalira hadn't chosen this any more than he had. But the sheer audacity of the situation made it hard to think clearly. After a moment, Kalira stepped closer, her voice softening. "I sense your frustration, but perhaps it would be best to approach this pragmatically. I can be of use to you, Samuel Walker, and in time you may find that our partnership benefits you more than you realize." Sam sighed, his resistance wavering. "Fine. But let's get one thing straight. You're not here to serve me. If we're stuck with this, then we're equals. Got it? Kalira inclined her head, a glimmer of approval in her eyes. As you wish. Sam rubbed the back of his neck, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that his life had just taken a turn he wasn't ready for. As Kalira began to explore the room with a curious gaze, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of chaos she was about to bring into his carefully ordered existence. The next morning, Sam awoke to the faint hum of machinery and the smell of something burning. He groaned, dragging himself out of bed, and stumbled into the small workshop adjacent to his living quarters. Kalira stood at the workbench, her delicate fingers tracing over a half-assembled engine part. A thin wisp of smoke rose from a tool she was holding, the charred remains of a circuit board beside her. "What are you doing?" Sam barked, rushing over. "That's delicate equipment." Kalira glanced at him, unfazed by his outburst. "Your workshop is inefficiently organized." "I am attempting to streamline the process. By frying my circuits," he snapped, grabbing the damaged board. "An unfortunate miscalculation," she admitted, placing the tool down. "But the design of your technology is rudimentary. I assumed it could handle minor adjustments." "Rudimentary?" Sam's eyes narrowed. "I built this myself. It works just fine when people don't mess with it." Kalira raised a silver eyebrow. "Fine is not optimal. My adjustments would have increased efficiency by 20%, Sam groaned, running a hand through his hair. "I don't care about efficiency right now. I care about getting through the day without another surprise from you." Kalira studied him for a moment, then inclined her head. "Very well. I shall refrain from making changes without consulting you." "Thanks," Sam muttered, turning his attention to salvaging the damaged part. He could feel her watching him, her gaze uncomfortably intense. After a few minutes of silence, she spoke again. "You are skilled with your hands." Sam froze, his mind tripping over the unintended double meaning. He glanced up to find her expression was, for once, unreadable. Thanks, I guess." Kalira took a step closer, her voice quieter. "Your work reflects patience and precision. It is not a quality I expected from a human." "Glad to exceed expectations," Sam replied dryly, trying to focus on his repairs. Her proximity was distracting, her faint floral scent cutting through the usual metallic tang of the workshop. Kalira tilted her head. "You are uneasy. Why?" "Because you're standing too close," he said, shooting her a pointed look. Kalira stepped back, her lips curving in what might have been amusement. "Your boundaries are noted." Sam exhaled, turning back to his work. "So, is this what I'm in for? You hanging around judging my tech and ignoring personal space?" "Judging is not my intent," Kalira replied. "Observation is necessary to understand your methods, and as for proximity," she paused, her gaze softening, "it is difficult to explain. The bond compels me to remain near you." Sam frowned, setting the repaired part aside. "Compels you how?" Kalira hesitated. "It is not a physical requirement but an emotional one. Distance creates discomfort, as I mentioned before." "Great," Sam muttered, leaning back against the workbench. "So we're stuck in some kind of psychic rubber band." "Precisely," Kalira said with a small nod. "But the effects lessen with mutual cooperation." Sam crossed his arms, studying her. "You're really serious about all this, aren't you?" "I take my obligations seriously, yes," she replied, meeting his gaze. "Do you not?" "I didn't sign up for this, remember," Sam shot back. "Forgive me if I'm not thrilled about my life being hijacked." Kalira's expression softened again, and for the first time Sam thought he saw genuine understanding in her eyes. "You have every right to feel as you do, but dwelling on resistance will not change our circumstances. Perhaps it is better to focus on what we can accomplish together." Sam sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No," Kalira said simply. "It is my duty to ensure this partnership succeeds, whether you wish to embrace it or not." He couldn't help but chuckle, though there was no humor in it. "You're relentless." "Adaptable," Kalira corrected, her lips twitching into a faint smile. Shaking his head, Sam pushed off the workbench. Fine, if we're doing this, you might as well make yourself useful. Can you hold that panel in place while I secure the bolts? Kalira stepped forward, her movements graceful despite her size. Of course. As they worked side by side, Sam couldn't help but notice how easily she followed his instructions. For all her earlier criticisms, Kalira was surprisingly quick to adapt to his methods. It was almost pleasant, though he wouldn't admit that out loud. When the repair was finished, Sam leaned back and inspected their work. Not bad, he admitted, glancing at her. Maybe you're not as useless as I thought. Kalira arched an eyebrow. High praise indeed. A faint smile tugged at his lips, but he quickly suppressed it. He wasn't ready to admit it yet, but working with her didn't feel as awful as he'd expected. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much more complicated ordeal. By the third day, Sam was beginning to understand that life with Kalira was anything but predictable. She seemed determined to insert herself into every aspect of his routine, from his morning coffee, which she insisted on enhancing with some alien spice that nearly burned his tongue, to his engineering projects. Every moment was a tug-of-war between his desire for normalcy and her unrelenting insistence on being helpful. The latest disaster involved his drone prototype, a sleek little machine he'd been fine-tuning for months. Kalira had taken one look at the schematics and decided it needed an upgrade. This propulsion system is inefficient, she had declared, pointing to his carefully calibrated design. I can augment it with energy crystals from my homeworld. No, you can't, Sam had replied firmly, because you're going to break it. Again. She'd narrowed her eyes at him, her hands on her hips in a stance that would have been comical if not for the sheer force of her presence. Your lack of trust is unwarranted. My lack of trust is completely warranted, Sam shot back. Remember the circuit board, or the coffee incident. That spice is highly regarded among my people, she retorted, lifting her chin. Your intolerance for it is hardly my fault, he groaned, rubbing his temples. Fine, you want to help. Go organize the tools or something. Just leave the drone alone. Kalira had looked genuinely offended, but to his relief, she relented, until now. Sam stood in the doorway of his workshop, staring at the open panel on the drone and the strange crystalline apparatus embedded where his propulsion system used to be. Kalira, he said, his voice dangerously calm. What did you do? She turned from the workbench, a screwdriver in hand and an unapologetic look on her face. I improved it. He strode over, inspecting the damage. This was supposed to be a stealth drone. How is it supposed to stay stealthy with a glowing rock shoved into it? Kalira tilted her head. The crystal emits minimal light when properly calibrated. It will increase speed and maneuverability significantly. Sam pressed his palms against the workbench, taking a deep breath. You had no right to touch this. You were taking too long, she said, as if that explained everything. Efficiency is paramount. It's my project, he snapped, glaring at her. You don't get to decide what's efficient. For a moment, Kalira didn't respond. Her expression softened, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. I apologize. I did not intend to overstep. Sam blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in her voice. He wasn't used to seeing her anything but confident, and the sudden vulnerability threw him off balance. She hesitated, glancing at the drone. I wished to prove myself useful. You seemed displeased with my presence. Sam let out a sigh, the tension in his shoulders easing. Look, I get it. You're trying to help, but you've got to stop steamrolling me. This isn't a competition. Kalira's gaze met his, and for once her eyes weren't filled with quiet defiance. You are correct. I acted impulsively. It will not happen again. Sam scratched the back of his head, feeling a pang of guilt. I didn't mean to snap at you, it's just, this is how I work. I need to do things at my own pace. She nodded slowly. Understood. I will endeavor to respect your methods. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Sam gestured to the drone. "So, does this thing actually work, or did you just turn it into a fancy paperweight?" Kalira's lips curved into a faint smile. "It works. I tested it." "You tested it?" His eyes widened. Without telling me, her expression shifted to one of mild amusement. "I wanted to ensure its functionality before presenting it to you." Sam stared at her, torn between annoyance and reluctant admiration. "You're unbelievable." "Adaptable," she corrected, a glint of mischief in her eyes. He shook his head, unable to suppress a chuckle. "Fine. Let's see what your fancy crystal can do." Kalira stepped aside as Sam powered up the drone. To his surprise and mild irritation, the propulsion system hummed to life smoothly, the crystal glowing faintly as the drone hovered in place. It was faster, more responsive, and eerily quiet. "Okay," he admitted grudgingly. "You might be onto something." Kalira's smile widened, and for the first time it felt warm rather than smug. "Your praise is noted." "Don't let it go to your head," Sam muttered, but he couldn't help the small grin tugging at his lips. Maybe having her around wouldn't be so bad after all. As the days wore on, Sam and Kalira began to fall into an uneasy rhythm. He begrudgingly admitted that her insights were sometimes helpful when they didn't come at the cost of his sanity, and she made an effort to consult him before making any changes to his projects. They still bickered often, but there was a strange sort of energy in their exchanges, a push and pull that neither of them seemed eager to stop. The real test of their growing partnership came late one afternoon when an alert blared through Sam's comm system. He rushed to the control panel, his heart sinking as he saw the warning. An unauthorized drone had breached the perimeter of his scrapyard. "Is this normal?" Kalira asked, appearing at his side. "Not even a little," Sam muttered, pulling up the surveillance feed. The screen displayed a sleek black drone hovering ominously near the edge of the yard. Its design was military-grade, far more advanced than anything Sam had ever worked with. Kalira's eyes narrowed. "That is not human technology." "What?" Sam glanced at her. "Then who does it belong to?" She didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the screen. "The design is unfamiliar, but it resembles certain models used by rogue factions. This could be a scouting unit." "A scouting unit for what?" Sam asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "To locate me," she said quietly, "or more precisely, to recover me." Sam's stomach turned. "You're telling me someone sent that thing here because of you?" Kalira met his gaze, her expression grim. "It is a possibility." Before Sam could respond, the drone on the screen emitted a pulse of light scanning the area. A chill ran down his spine. "Okay, great. What's the plan?" Kalira straightened, her demeanor shifting into something more commanding. "We must disable it before it transmits data back to its source. If they confirm my location, reinforcements will follow." Sam groaned. "Of course they will. Why wouldn't my life get more complicated?" She ignored his complaint, already moving toward the workshop. "Your modified drone will suffice for this task. Its stealth capabilities should allow it to approach undetected." "Wait, you mean the drone you upgraded?" Sam called after her. "The one I wasn't even sure I wanted to use." "It is your best option," she replied over her shoulder. "Unless you have a better idea." Sam muttered a string of curses under his breath but followed her into the workshop. Kalira was already powering up the modified drone, her movements precise and efficient. "Fine," he said, grabbing the controller. "But if this thing blows up, I'm blaming you." "Understood," she said, her lips twitching into a faint smirk. With the drone powered up and ready, Sam guided it toward the intruder, keeping an eye on the live feed. His palms were slick with sweat as he maneuvered the tiny machine through the scrapyard, staying out of the larger drone's line of sight. "Keep it steady," Kalira said, leaning over his shoulder. Her proximity was distracting, but her calm tone somehow steadied his nerves. "Easy for you to say," Sam muttered, biting his lip as he brought the drone closer. The modified propulsion system hummed quietly, the crystal glowing faintly. When the two drones were within range, Kalira tapped the console. Activate the disruptor pulse. It will disable the enemy drone systems temporarily. Sam hesitated. You installed a disruptor. When? During my initial adjustments, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Activate it now. With a sigh, Sam pressed the button. The modified drone emitted a burst of energy, and the enemy drone jerked violently before plummeting to the ground. Ha! Sam couldn't help but grin. It worked. Kalira's expression was one of quiet satisfaction. You doubted me, always, he said, but there was no heat in his tone. What now? Do we just leave it there? No, Kalira said, already heading for the door. We need to retrieve it and wipe its data before it reboots. Sam grabbed his jacket and followed her outside, the chill of the evening air doing little to calm his racing thoughts. The enemy drone lay in a heap near the fence, its sleek black frame dented from the fall. Kalira knelt beside it, her fingers deftly prying open a panel. Sam watched in awe as she worked, her movements quick and precise. Within moments, she had removed a glowing data core. This contains the transmission logs, she explained, holding it up. If they were able to send a signal, we would already be under attack, but we cannot leave anything to chance. Sam took the core from her, feeling its faint warmth. What do we do with it? Destroy it, she said simply. He hesitated, then nodded. Let's do it. As they worked together to dismantle the core, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whoever, or whatever, was after Kalira wouldn't give up so easily, and despite his protests, he was now firmly in the middle of it. After the drone incident, Sam realized his life had permanently veered off course. The enemy drone was a stark reminder that Kalira wasn't just some quirky alien servant thrust into his life, she was a target. And by extension, so was he. The following morning, Sam found Kalira in the workshop, scrutinizing the remnants of the enemy drone. She'd already dismantled most of it, spreading its components across his workbench. I don't think you're supposed to take souvenirs, Sam said, leaning against the door frame. Kalira didn't look up. This technology could offer valuable insights into our adversaries. I must understand their capabilities if we are to survive. Survive? He echoed, crossing his arms. That's an awfully dramatic way to put it. Her sharp gaze snapped to his, and the intensity in her expression made his stomach twist. You underestimate the threat. They will not stop until I am captured or eliminated. Sam swallowed hard, her words sinking in. Right, no pressure. Kalira turned back to the dismantled drone, her fingers moving with practiced precision. I will not allow them to harm you, Sam. You are under my protection, he chuckled dryly. Funny, I thought I was supposed to be protecting you. Her hand stilled and she glanced at him, a flicker of something softer in her eyes. It seems we must protect each other. The weight of her statement settled between them, and for a moment Sam wasn't sure how to respond. He finally cleared his throat and gestured to the wreckage. So, what's the plan? Build a bigger, scarier drone to scare them off. Kalira tilted her head, considering. A defensive system would be prudent. Your current security measures are insufficient. Hey, my security measures have worked just fine until now, Sam protested. Against scrap thieves, perhaps, she said, arching an elegant brow. But not against interstellar hunters. Fair point, he muttered, dragging a hand through his hair. So what do you suggest? She straightened, her demeanor turning authoritative. We will need to reinforce the perimeter with automated turrets, cloaking devices, and an alert system capable of detecting advanced technology. Sam blinked. That's ambitious. It is necessary, Kalira said firmly. And you have the skills to make it happen, he snorted. Flattery won't make this any easier, you know. It is not flattery, she said, her tone surprisingly earnest. You are remarkably resourceful, Sam. I have seen your ingenuity firsthand. The compliment caught him off guard, and he found himself smiling despite the situation. Okay, fine, I'll see what I can rig up, but you're helping. Her lips curved into a small, amused smile. Naturally. The two of them spent the next several hours working side by side. Sam sketched out designs for turrets and cloaking nodes, while Kalira disassembled the enemy drone for usable parts. She had an uncanny ability to spot components he'd overlooked, and her understanding of alien tech proved invaluable. As they worked, the tension between them eased, replaced by a sense of camaraderie. They traded ideas and jokes, their bickering more playful than argumentative. Sam couldn't help but notice the way Kalira's eyes lit up when she explained a concept or how her laugh, rare as it was, made the heavy atmosphere feel a little lighter. At one point, Kalira paused to examine a tangled mess of wires Sam was struggling with. "Allow me," she said, taking the bundle from his hands. He watched as she deftly separated the wires, her fingers moving with practiced grace. "You're pretty good at this," he admitted. "I was trained extensively in engineering," she said, not looking up. "Among other disciplines." "Other disciplines?" Sam raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Combat, strategy, diplomacy," she listed casually. "It was expected of me." He leaned back, folding his arms. "Expected by who?" Her hands faltered for a brief moment before she resumed her work. "My people." Sam didn't miss the flicker of pain in her expression, and he hesitated before pressing further. "What happened to them?" Kalira's gaze dropped to the wires in her hands, and for a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she sighed softly. "They were betrayed, destroyed by those they trusted." Sam's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." She looked up at him, her expression guarded but vulnerable. "It is in the past. What matters now is ensuring their legacy is not extinguished." He nodded, sensing that pushing her for more details would only cause her pain. Instead, he gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Well, for what it's worth, you've got me in your corner, and I'm not bad at fixing things." Kalira's lips curved into a faint smile, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Your loyalty is appreciated, Sam." They returned to their work, the silence between them comfortable. By the time night fell, they had made significant progress on the defensive systems. Sam couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what they'd accomplished together. As they stood in the workshop, surveying their work, Kalira turned to him. "You have exceeded my expectations." "Don't get used to it," Sam said, smirking. "I'm not always this impressive." Kalira tilted her head, her expression softening. "You underestimate yourself." Her words lingered in the air, and Sam felt a warmth he couldn't quite explain. For the first time since she'd entered his life, he began to wonder if her presence wasn't such a burden after all. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sam and Kalira worked tirelessly to fortify the property, transforming his modest homestead into a makeshift fortress. The automated turrets were installed at strategic points, cloaking devices camouflaged key entryways, and the alert system was fine-tuned to detect even the faintest trace of alien technology. Sam was no stranger to hard work, but the pace Kalira set was relentless. Every time he thought they'd earned a break, she pointed out another vulnerability, her tone leaving no room for argument. And yet, despite her demanding nature, he found himself enjoying their partnership. Her determination was infectious, and her occasional flashes of dry humor kept him on his toes. Late one evening, Sam stepped back from the console he'd been wiring, wiping sweat from his brow. "That's it. The alert system's live. If anything sneezes within a mile of this place, we'll know about it." Kalira, perched on a stool nearby, inspected his handiwork with an approving nod. "Impressive. Your technical aptitude is unexpected." He smirked. "You've got to stop saying stuff like that. I might start thinking you actually like me." Kalira raised an eyebrow, her lips quirking into a faint smile. "I would not go that far," Sam laughed, shaking his head. "Right, of course not. Wouldn't want to ruin your reputation." Their banter was interrupted by a soft chime from the alert system. Sam stiffened, his hand instinctively moving to the console. "That's not good. Something tripped the outer perimeter." Kalira was instantly on her feet, her expression sharp. "What is the source?" Sam typed furiously, pulling up the surveillance feed. A grainy image appeared on the screen, showing a sleek, shadowy figure moving through the trees. It was humanoid in shape but unnervingly smooth, its movements fluid and predatory. "Is that—" Sam began, but Kalira cut him off. "An assassin," she said, her voice tight. "Sent to retrieve me." His stomach twisted. "You're sure?" She shot him a look. "Very." The words had barely left her mouth when the figure on the screen stopped, tilting its head as if sensing it was being watched. A moment later, it disappeared from view, moving faster than the camera could track. "Great," Sam muttered, grabbing the stun rifle he'd kept by the door since the drone attack. "Guess we're doing this the hard way." Kalira stepped in front of him, her expression unyielding. "You will stay here," he bristled. "Excuse me. This is not your fight," she said firmly. "If you leave this building, you will only endanger yourself." Sam glared at her. "And what, you're just going to handle this on your own?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Like hell you are," he shot back, gripping the rifle tightly. "This is my home, my fight. You don't get to bench me." Kalira stared at him, her expression a mixture of frustration and something he couldn't quite place. "You are insufferably stubborn." "So I've been told," he said, pushing past her and heading for the door. Kalira caught his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "If you insist on involving yourself, you will follow my lead." "Understood." "Understood," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure he meant it. They stepped outside, the night air cool and heavy with tension. The trees cast long, shifting shadows in the moonlight, and every rustle of leaves made Sam's pulse spike. Kalira moved ahead of him, her posture rigid and alert, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. For a few minutes, the only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. Then, without warning, Kalira froze, her eyes narrowing. "Above us," she whispered. Sam barely had time to look up before something dropped from the canopy, landing with a thud a few feet away. The assassin was even more unsettling in person, its polished black surface reflecting the moonlight like liquid metal, its featureless face turned toward them, and a low, mechanical hum emanated from its body. Kalira moved first, drawing her blade in a single fluid motion. The assassin lunged at her, its movements unnaturally fast, but she met it head-on, her blade sparking as it clashed against its sleek, armored limbs. Sam watched, frozen for a split second before his instincts kicked in. Raising the rifle, he aimed at the assassin's torso and fired. The stun round hit its mark, causing the creature to stagger briefly, but it quickly regained its footing, its focus snapping to Sam. "Oh crap," he muttered as it charged toward him. Kalira intercepted the assassin mid-stride, her blade slicing through one of its limbs with terrifying precision. "Focus, Sam," she shouted. "Aim for the joints." Easier said than done, he thought, but he did his best, firing at the creature's knees and elbows. Each hit slowed it down just enough for Kalira to land another strike, her movements a blur of calculated aggression. Finally, with a decisive swing, she severed the assassin's head from its body. The creature collapsed in a heap of metallic shards, its eerie hum fading into silence. Sam lowered the rifle, his heart pounding. "Is it dead?" Kalira nudged the remains with her foot, her blade still at the ready. "For now." "Great," Sam said, his voice shaky. "So how many more of these things are coming?" Kalira sheathed her blade, her expression grim. "As many as it takes to capture me." Sam let out a bitter laugh. "Fantastic, just what I needed." Kalira stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. "You could still walk away, Sam. This is not your burden to bear." He met her gaze, his jaw tightening. "You're wrong. You showed up on my doorstep, Kalira. That makes it my burden too." Her expression softened, and for a moment the tension between them melted away. "You are remarkable," she said quietly. Sam smirked, trying to lighten the mood. "Don't get used to it." Kalira's lips curved into a faint smile, but the weight of their situation lingered between them. They'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. The aftermath of the battle left a palpable tension hanging in the air. Sam and Kalira stood in the moonlight, surrounded by the shattered remnants of the assassin. Though the immediate danger had passed, the encounter served as a stark reminder of the growing threat they faced. Sam looked down at the shards of the mechanical invader, their reflective surfaces still shimmering ominously, as if warning him that this was just the beginning. Kalira crouched over the remains, her movements methodical as she examined the pieces. "This model is newer than I expected," she said, her voice tight with unease. "They are escalating their efforts." Sam rested the rifle against his shoulder, his brow furrowed. "Newer? You're saying they are upgrading their assassins just for you?" She stood, holding up a shard of the assassin's head. A faint blue light pulsed at its core. "Not just for me. For efficiency. The Foricon Empire does not tolerate failure. This design is likely the result of their need to retrieve me before I can. Defect entirely." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Defect? I thought you already had." Kalira hesitated, her expression unreadable. "My departure was sudden. Their pursuit suggests they still view me as their asset, one they refuse to lose." "Sounds like an ex that doesn't know when to quit," Sam muttered, but the weight of her words lingered. "So, what's the plan? Because I'm guessing sitting here waiting for the next upgrade isn't an option." Kalira's gaze shifted to the horizon, her eyes distant. "We need to move. Their scans will show this location soon. The longer we stay, the greater the risk." Sam gestured to the reinforced house behind them. "Move where? I've got defenses here. Out there, we're exposed." She turned to face him, her expression firm. "Out there, we are mobile, harder to track. The longer we remain stationary, the more likely they are to send larger forces." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. Let's say we leave. Where do we go?" Kalira hesitated, and for the first time he saw uncertainty in her usually steely demeanor. "There are safe zones, resistance pockets, humans and other species who oppose the Empire's dominion. I can guide us there." Sam crossed his arms. "Resistance pockets sounds like a good way to get shot at by both sides." "It is a risk," she admitted, "but their technology rivals the Empire's. If we reach them, they can help." Sam studied her for a moment. There was a vulnerability in her eyes she rarely let surface. Whatever this resistance was, it wasn't just a tactical decision, it was personal. "All right," he said finally. "If you say this resistance is our best shot, then let's pack up and hit the road." Kalira's shoulders relaxed slightly, though her expression remained guarded. "You should gather what you can carry. We leave within the hour." As Sam turned to head back inside, he glanced over his shoulder at her. "Hey, Kalira," she looked at him, her head tilted in curiosity. "If we make it through this, you owe me a straight answer about why they're so desperate to get you back." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. "If we survive, you will have your answer." The following hours were a flurry of activity. Sam and Kalira loaded the truck with essential supplies: food, water, tools, and the portable cloaking device she insisted would be vital. Kalira meticulously disassembled the most critical components of the home's defense system, integrating them into their equipment. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, they stood by the truck, its bed packed and ready. Sam leaned against the driver's side door, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. "You sure they won't pick up on us the second we hit the road?" Kalira adjusted the device strapped to her wrist, its alien interface glowing softly. "The cloaking field will mask our presence temporarily. If we move swiftly, we should avoid detection." He nodded, climbing into the driver's seat. "Let's hope you're right." Kalira joined him, sliding into the passenger seat. The truck's engine roared to life, breaking the silence of the early morning. As they pulled away from the homestead, Sam cast one last glance at the place he'd called home. It felt strange to leave it behind, but there was no denying it was no longer safe. The first few hours of their journey were uneventful. Kalira's device projected a faint shimmering field around the vehicle, effectively cloaking them from aerial scans. She remained vigilant, her gaze constantly scanning their surroundings for any sign of pursuit. Sam tried to lighten the mood. "So these resistance guys, they friendly, or are we walking into another mess?" Lyra's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Friendly is subjective. They are pragmatic. If we bring value, they will help." "Value, huh?" Sam chuckled. "Good to know I'm being measured." She gave him a sidelong glance. "You have proven resourceful. That will suffice." "High praise coming from you," he teased, though her words warmed him more than he cared to admit. Lyra was about to respond when the cloaking field shimmered, a ripple of energy passing through it. She stiffened, her hand flying to the device. "Something is wrong." "What kind of something?" Sam asked, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Before she could answer, a deafening roar filled the air. A sleek black ship burst through the clouds above, its angular design unmistakably alien. It swooped low, scanning the ground as its cannons charged with an ominous hum. Lyra's voice was sharp. "Off the road, now!" Sam swerved the truck onto a narrow dirt path, the tires kicking up dust as they raced toward the cover of the forest. The ship followed, its cannons firing bursts of energy that exploded dangerously close. "Any bright ideas, Lyra?" Sam shouted over the chaos. Her fingers flew across the interface of her device. "If I can overload the cloaking field, I can create a decoy signature, but it will destroy the emitter." "Do it," he yelled. "Better that than us getting fried." Lyra hesitated for only a second before activating the overload. The cloaking field flared brightly, sending out a pulse of energy that split into multiple false signals. The ship faltered, its sensors overwhelmed by the sudden surge of targets. Sam didn't wait to see if it would recover. He floored the gas, weaving through the trees as Lyra watched the ship's movements intently. After a tense few minutes, it veered away, chasing one of the decoy signals. The silence that followed was deafening. Sam slowed the truck, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. "Is it gone?" Lyra nodded, though her expression was grim. "For now, but they will regroup." Sam let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Great. One problem at a time." Lyra looked at him, her gaze steady. "You handled that well." He raised an eyebrow. "You sound surprised." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps I am." For a moment, the tension between them eased, replaced by a shared sense of accomplishment. But the road ahead was long, and the dangers they faced were only just beginning. The forest grew denser as Sam navigated the truck through its narrow trails, the trees towering like silent sentinels. The air was thick with tension, and despite the temporary reprieve, the weight of the pursuit loomed heavy over them. Lyra sat rigidly in her seat, her gaze flicking to the shadows between the trees as if expecting danger to leap out at any moment. Sam glanced at her, his knuckles still tight on the steering wheel. "You've been quiet, thinking about the resistance or something worse." Her eyes met his briefly before she turned her attention back to the forest. "Both. The resistance is our best chance, but reaching them will not be easy. The Empire will anticipate our moves." He snorted. "They sure have a knack for making things complicated. You're sure these resistance people won't just shoot first and ask questions later?" "They will assess us before making a decision," Lyra replied. "If I vouch for you, they should trust me." Sam raised an eyebrow. "That's comforting. But what about you? Are you sure they'll trust you?" Lyra hesitated, a rare crack in her confident demeanor. "I, left under complicated circumstances. Some may question my loyalty." Sam frowned. "Great. So you're saying we're walking into a situation where both sides might want us dead." "It is a calculated risk," she admitted, "but one we must take." The truck hit a rut, jostling them both, and Sam tightened his grip on the wheel. "Calculated risk, huh? You're really selling this plan, Lyra." Her lips twitched in the faintest semblance of a smile. "You're still here, aren't you?" "Yeah, well," he muttered. "Maybe I've got a thing for lost causes." The tension in the air lightened for a moment, but their reprieve was short-lived. Lyra stiffened suddenly, her hand flying to the device on her wrist. Stop the truck." "What?" Sam asked, but her sharp tone left no room for argument. He slammed on the brakes and the truck skidded to a halt. Kalira was out of the vehicle before it even fully stopped, her movements swift and calculated. Sam followed, grabbing his rifle as he climbed out. "What's going on?" She didn't answer immediately, instead scanning the area with her device. The faint glow of its display illuminated her face, highlighting the sharp focus in her expression. "We are not alone." Sam's heart sank. "More of those assassins." "No," she said, her tone grim. "Something else." The forest was eerily silent, the usual chorus of rustling leaves and chirping insects replaced by an unnatural stillness. Sam scanned the shadows, his finger hovering over the trigger of his rifle. To find something else. Kalira's gaze darted to the trees ahead. "They're moving." He followed her line of sight, his eyes straining against the dim light filtering through the canopy. At first he saw nothing. Then a flicker of movement, a shape darting between the trees too fast to be human. "Stay close," Kalira said, her voice low but firm. She stepped in front of him, her stance defensive. Sam felt a pang of irritation. "Hey, I'm not some damsel in distress, you know." "Noted," she said, not taking her eyes off the forest. "But you're not faster than them." Before he could argue further, a guttural growl echoed through the trees, low and menacing. The sound sent a chill down Sam's spine. He tightened his grip on the rifle, his pulse quickening. "Any chance this is some friendly forest wildlife?" he asked. Kalira's response was grim. "No." The first creature emerged from the shadows, its lithe, sinewy form unlike anything Sam had seen before. Its body was covered in sleek, dark fur that seemed to absorb the light, and its glowing red eyes locked onto them with predatory intent. It was humanoid in shape but moved on all fours, its elongated limbs giving it an unsettling, spider-like gait. "Let me guess," Sam said, his voice tense. "Empire pets," Vorak, Kalira said, her tone clipped. "They are used for tracking fugitives. They won't stop until we're dead." As if on cue, more Vorak emerged from the shadows, their growls blending into a chilling cacophony. Sam counted at least 6, but he suspected there were more hidden in the darkness. "Well, this is cozy," he muttered. "Got a plan." Kalira's hands moved to the device on her wrist, her fingers flying over the controls. "I can disable their neural implants, but I need time." "Time we don't have," Sam said, raising his rifle. One of the Vorak lunged toward them, its movements a blur. He fired, the shot finding its mark and sending the creature sprawling, but another was already charging from the opposite side. Kalira moved with fluid precision, a small, curved blade appearing in her hand. She intercepted the creature mid-leap, her strike swift and deadly. The Vorak collapsed in a heap, but more were closing in. "Keep them off me," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "I'll disable them." "No pressure," Sam muttered, firing at another Vorak. The recoil jarred his shoulder, but the shot struck true. Still, for every one he took down, it felt like 2 more appeared. Kalira knelt on the ground, her focus entirely on the device. Sam positioned himself in front of her, his rifle barking out shot after shot. The Vorak were relentless, their glowing eyes like malevolent stars in the darkness. "Hurry up, Kalira," he shouted, reloading with shaking hands. "Almost there," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension. One of the creatures broke through his line of fire, leaping toward Kalira with a snarl. Sam didn't think, he acted. Dropping the rifle, he lunged forward, tackling the Vorak mid-air. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but he managed to wrestle the creature to the ground, holding it at bay with every ounce of strength he had. Kalira's voice cut through the chaos. "Done." A pulse of energy erupted from her device, washing over the forest like a wave. The Vorak froze mid-attack, their glowing eyes dimming as their bodies went limp. Sam rolled off the creature he'd tackled, breathing hard. "Tell me that's permanent." "For now," Kalira said, standing and offering him a hand. "But we need to move before their handlers realize what happened." He took her hand, allowing her to pull him to his feet. You really know how to keep things interesting. She arched an eyebrow. Would you prefer boring? Sam managed a breathless laugh. Not a chance. As they climbed back into the truck and sped away, the forest behind them fell into an uneasy silence once more. The truck bounced over uneven terrain as they sped deeper into the forest, the oppressive silence of the night settling around them once more. Sam's pulse was still racing from the encounter with the Vorak, his adrenaline high as the hum of the engine filled the space between them. He stole a glance at Kalira, whose face remained unreadable, her gaze fixed on the dark road ahead. "Is it always like this?" he asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Kalira's eyes flicked to him for a brief moment before returning to the path ahead. "More often than I would like." Sam chuckled dryly. "Well, I was hoping for a little less life-threatening excitement. I mean, really, I've barely gotten a chance to breathe." She didn't smile, but there was a slight softening in her features as she looked at him again. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this world. You didn't drag me anywhere. I'm here because I'm the one who didn't know when to quit," he replied, the weight of his words settling on both of them. The air inside the truck felt heavier as Kalira's fingers moved over the controls of her wrist device. "We're almost there." Sam nodded, not trusting himself to speak again. He knew they had a long way to go before this was all over, but a small part of him, one that he hated for existing, hoped that whatever came next would bring a sense of resolution. Something other than endless running and fighting. Maybe, just maybe, they could find some kind of peace in this war. A light flickered in the distance, a subtle glimmer through the trees. Kalira's posture stiffened, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the growing glow. "That's the resistance camp. We're close." Sam squinted toward the light, barely able to make out shapes moving in and around the glowing camp. He tightened his grip on the wheel. "You sure they'll take us in?" Kalira hesitated, her fingers tapping the edge of her device nervously. "They will if they trust me. If they don't," she trailed off, her eyes flashing with something unreadable. Sam didn't need her to finish the sentence. If they didn't trust her, things could go sideways fast. He wasn't exactly in a position to help her if that happened. As they approached the camp, the flickering light grew brighter, revealing makeshift tents and barricades scattered across a clearing. Figures moved between them, their silhouettes a mix of alien and human forms. The sense of urgency returned, but this time it was paired with something else, a spark of hope. Sam parked the truck at the edge of the camp, killing the engine. For a moment neither of them moved. The world outside seemed eerily still. Kalira turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Whatever happens, Sam, thank you." He raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" Her gaze softened, though she still avoided meeting his eyes. "For not leaving me, for fighting with me." Sam let out a soft laugh, though it was laced with weariness. "Like I had a choice." She didn't respond to that, instead sliding out of the truck. Sam followed, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud as he surveyed the camp. The tension in the air was palpable. This was it. Their last shot. A figure emerged from the shadows, stepping forward with purpose. A woman, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair pulled back into a tight braid. She was flanked by two armed guards, their weapons drawn and ready. Her sharp gaze fixed on Kalira immediately. "Kalira," the woman said, her voice low but carrying authority. "We've been waiting for you." Kalira stepped forward, her stance shifting from guarded to resolute. "I need your help." The woman studied her for a moment before glancing at Sam, who stood slightly behind her. "Who's this?" Kalira didn't hesitate. "A human. He's with me." The woman's eyes flickered to Sam again, and though her expression remained unreadable, Sam felt the weight of her scrutiny. "I'll vouch for him," Kalira added firmly. "He's with us." After a tense moment, the woman gave a nod. "Then welcome. We'll discuss the details inside." The guards stepped aside, and Sam and Kalira walked through the camp, the others watching them with wary eyes. He could feel the weight of their judgment, but Kalira kept her head high, her movements confident despite the underlying tension. Inside the main tent, a table was covered with maps and equipment. The woman sat down, gesturing for them to do the same. "We have a lot to discuss," the woman said, her voice hard as steel. "The Empire is tightening its grip. We can't afford any more mistakes." Kalira nodded, her tone equally serious. "We're here to help, but we need your support." Sam leaned against the tent pole, his arms crossed. "And we need to know what we're up against." The woman exchanged a look with Kalira. "The Empire's reach is everywhere. Their forces are closer than we thought, but we also have some unexpected allies." She turned to Kalira. "Is he one of them?" Kalira's gaze flicked to Sam. "He's more than you think." The woman's sharp gaze didn't soften, but she nodded. "We'll need to see what he can do. The Empire won't stop until they find us. If we're going to make a stand, it's now or never." Sam swallowed, the weight of the moment sinking in. The stakes had never been higher. But looking at Kalira, her unwavering determination, he knew he couldn't back down now. "So, what's the plan?" he asked, meeting the woman's eyes. Her expression hardened as she stood. "We fight." Kalira turned to him then, her gaze steady. "Are you ready?" Sam looked around at the maps, the faces of the resistance fighters and the shadows looming outside the tent. He wasn't sure if anyone could truly be ready for what was coming, but he didn't hesitate. "Always." Kalira gave a small, approving nod. "Then let's finish this." And together they would. If you enjoyed this thrilling journey through intergalactic conflict and unexpected alliances, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more epic sci-fi adventures. Stay tuned. There's more to come.